This is the second story from Africa, and it's called Horribly Beautiful.
Horribly beautiful.
Horribly Beautiful. Right, in 1972, about August, we went on our first long driving holiday out of Zambia with Gwen and David and Helen, who was like a baby in a carry cot, in Dave's car, which was a small Mazda estate car. And we drove through Zambia, right to the top of Zambia and out into Tanzania, through Iringa and Mbeya to Dar es Salaam. After Dar es Salaam, we drove up the coast to an interesting Arab town called Bagamoyo, which was interesting because that's where most of the African expeditions that started from Zanzibar landed on the African coast and went inland towards the lakes from there.
It's also a slave port.
And it was renowned as a slave port, a depot for collecting slaves. Following Bagamoyo, we went further up the coast to a town called Tanga. Tanga was a port on the Indian Ocean, which was used for tea plantations. It was famous during the First World War because at that time Tanzania was occupied by the Germans. It was a German colony, and the neighbouring colony to Tanzania was Kenya, or Kenya in those days, and that was British. And the British in Kenya were anxious that the Germans in Tanzania should be sorted out, really, because they had a very strong local native army that they had trained. And so the British sent over an expeditionary force from India comprising mainly of Indian army regiments. But the Germans were very clever, and they used the railway system, and they used the well-trained local soldiers, and they defeated the British at the Battle of Tanga. It was a bit of a hiccup for the British. Anyway, that's not the story I was going to tell you. That's just a bit of background history. Tanga was a seaport with its own harbour, and overlooking the harbour was a rickety old colonial hotel with a tin roof and an enormous veranda at first floor level overlooking the harbour. We arrived there and decided that we would have a meal in the evening overlooking the harbour, late afternoon, overlooking the harbour. So there we were on this veranda, under this tin roof, looking down on the harbour, the famous harbour of Tanga. And on the next table to us, we noticed there was a young girl about the same age as ourselves, sitting on her own. So we leaned across to her and said, if you're eating on your own, perhaps you'd like to come and join us, which she agreed and came and sat down with us. From what I remember, she was wearing jeans and a grey sweater and had long hair that went down beyond her shoulders. She was a fairly plain looking girl. And of course we said to her, we introduced ourselves, and then we said to her, what are you doing in Africa? And she said, I'm ahead of my field in primatology. Very forcefully, very loud, with a deep Louisiana accent. And we all sat back and said, heavens, what's that? And she said, gorillas, they're horribly beautiful. And so she was a bit of a character at the time, unknown. But of course we worked out since that this was Diane Fossey, who was the famous anthropologist that was murdered in
Researched into
Rwanda
gorillas.
or Burundi, wherever she was doing research. And the timing was right. She had a Louisiana accent. She claimed to be the head of her field, so she was probably a very well-known anthropologist and
Ethnologist.
and what would you call it?
Ethnologist. I think.
Ethnologist, and it could only have been her. The film, she was portrayed by Sigourney Weaver in Gorillas in the Mist, but on this occasion she was not anything like Sigourney Weaver. As I said, she was quite a plain Jane.
She couldn't talk about anything else except gorillas, could she?
Yep, she couldn't talk about anything but gorillas. She was quite a handful.
Preoccupied.
That was the story for today.